Hello everybody, here we are today doing another playoff preview with the Nashville Predators set to take on the Vancouver Canucks. So before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So how exactly did we get here? We got here with the Vancouver Canucks being the best team in the league through about the first 55 games of the season for them, putting together a really nice year where they won their division title. They weren't able to win the President's Trophy, but still all around a great campaign as they hit 50 wins and are back again in the playoffs for the first time in a little bit. As for the Nashville Predators, nobody really knew what the expectations would be for this team going into the year. Barry Trotz taking over as GM after being the longtime coach with him for many years, being a coach in some other areas as well. But he takes over this side. They have an 18-game point streak and are able to make the playoffs with a 99-point season, reestablish themselves as a playoff team, something they had been for basically the past decade. So with that being said, this is just the second time that these two teams met in playoff history, the other time being back in 2011 when the Canucks beat them to go on to the Stanley Cup final during that playoff run. So with all that, what are some storylines to focus on through this series? Well, I think the first thing here is whether or not Thatcher Demko is going to be a little bit rusty. So Thatcher put together a very good season. He played 50 games, he had 35 wins, had a 2.44 goals against average and a .918 save percentage. Paired that with the fact that he had 5 shutouts, which was more than all of his combined shutouts in all the seasons prior to this. You can see the recipe for success. However, he was injured and missed the past 14 games for the team before returning to play the Calgary Flames in a bounce-back game to work off some of that rust after a knee injury. The problem is the team did not play well without Thatcher as they went 7-5-2 and were 27th in the league for save percentage. Casey DeSmith, in some of the situations we've seen in it this year too, I don't really know if there's anybody we can go out there and trust besides Thatcher. Obviously we have Solovs, but I'm looking at this and seeing a team that was still able to perform relatively well defensively, but without Demko in between the pipes, you just can't seem to trust whoever's going to be in there, besides, of course, Thatcher. And I think my biggest concern is this doesn't feel like the 2020 Vancouver Canucks, where when Jacob Markstrom was having a bad series against the Vegas Golden Knights, for a lot of times they were just getting outplayed, Thatcher came in there, and even though they were just still getting outplayed, he could save the day. I don't have that feeling with this team, and I am a little bit worried because the Canucks will have games where they'll give up, 40 shots, and Thatcher can save the day, but you don't really want him to have to. He hasn't played a full game since early March 7th, and with him still trying to work back himself into this game, you're hoping that he can be able to do so without a heavy workload. I think the Canucks, again, being a top 5 team, especially at even strength defensively, is going to allow him to be in a little bit better of a spot. But if he is facing a Nashville side that finished a lot better with good underlying numbers offensively this year, and they get off to a hot start early in the series, you could be looking at a point where, Demko's rust could be part of a problem, and Vancouver could be in trouble. The second talking point is, what are the Nashville Predators? Are they the team that had 56 points through their first 54 games, or are they more resembling the side that went 16-0-2 over their 18-game point streak? I think the answer kind of lies somewhere in the middle. Nashville was a team that has been able to string together wins even before that 18-game run. Problem is, of course, too, they were just about a point-per-game team over this period. I do got to say that over the past 10 games, especially after the point streak ended, the Predators haven't been amazing. They've got 4 wins in that time, but they were able to close out the year with 3 wins in their final 5 games. The only thing I will say too is a lot of these games, in fact, all of these games were against non-playoff teams, and many of them were bottom feeders wins against the Blackhawks, against the Blue Jackets. They did beat the Blues 6-3, but if you're looking at a side that you can't really seem to figure out what they're going to be, at their best, they are capable of beating anyone. At their worst, they're just kind of a patchy team that can't seem to find where they want to go. Now, I will say that's pretty normal for teams over the course of the season, and Philip Forsberg is going to be somebody that really gives us an idea of where this Nashville team is going to be. Forsberg had 23 goals over his final 28 games. Very impressive there, but it's going to have to be other people besides him. Ryan O'Reilly and Gustav Nyquist are players that you're probably going to be thinking of here. Ryan O'Reilly is kind of a weird guy where I will talk about how he's a good player, but then when he ends up having a good year, I'll be like, oh, that's all we're expecting from him. I'm expecting more. But then I'll be like, oh, Ryan O'Reilly had this many points. That's good for him. He had a good year, two-way as a player, whatever the case is. I don't really know. Whereas Gustav, you're looking at his numbers and seeing a career year and saying, heck yeah, really excited for him. Going to be more than just those guys, but again, Forsberg the goal scorer for the team, the only guy that's got over 30 goals this season. But the Predators are going to need a lot of players besides just Forsberg and Yossi and some of these individuals to be able to win this series and move on to the second round. And then the third and final storyline here is whether or not the Vancouver Canucks are overrated. Now, this might seem like blasphemy, especially as it's coming from a Canucks fan. But Vancouver was a team that had a really good year. Again, 50-win season for them, one of the best years in franchise history. And they started out the year incredibly hot. They went 37, 12, and 6 through the first 55 games, if I did my math correctly. 80 points, and were on pace to win the President's Trophy. Things have changed since then, as kind of around after the All-Star break, things haven't really been perfect, as they've gone 13, 11, and 3 over their past 27 games. Meaning they have more losses than wins over a 27-game period. Not really something that really fills you with a lot of confidence. And yes, you could probably attribute part of this to Thatcher Demko being out. Completely understandable, like we've said. Seems like they are a better team with their starting goalie in there. Crazy, imagine that. But Elias Pettersson is someone that signed a long-term extension, and guess how many points he has over his past 27 games? 17. I'm not saying that there's not more that could be underlying here, but there's just a lot of talk that goes into this being a Canadian team, being in Vancouver. And Pettersson also has a tendency to have a lower point total against good teams. Nothing crazy there, but you will see that constantly if you're a Canucks fan on multiple Canucks websites or just fan pages, if you will. And I really am hoping that he's able to have a good series, because if not, I know what will happen here with the media and talk about how if they lose, he's a huge part of it. And to be fair, he is. Now, Filip Hronek's another guy that comes to mind here, as he had 41 points through his first 55 games. He has 7 over his past 26. He's still getting a lot of minutes. He's averaging about 23 minutes on both sides of this when he was getting a lot of points versus when he wasn't. Again, we could talk about more underlying things, but this is just more to do with the fact that there are multiple players that have cooled off and could kind of help explain where this team has been over the past 27 games, where it's not been earlier in the year where they hadn't lost more than 2 games in a row, and to where the period started where they lost 3 in a row, kind of jump-started this bad point. But I think more of this is just centered around the fact that a lot of Canadian teams and fan bases are more negative, especially with the long cup drought. And you, like many people, probably thought the Canucks would not be nearly this good. And some talk has been made about have they finally run out of gas over a full 82-game season. I think we're going to find out here in the coming days as they take on Nashville on Saturday, I think. So overall, what are my thoughts on this series as it is pouring rain outside? My thoughts is this is not really a lock. I think a lot of people view this as a pretty much guaranteed win for the Vancouver Canucks, but I don't really necessarily think it's that case. Vancouver hasn't got a lot of playoff experience, especially for the core guys. They haven't played a home playoff game in Vancouver. There hasn't been a home playoff game in Vancouver since 2015. Of course, the bubble impacted that a bit. They're going to be experiencing a lot of that. They're going to be experiencing the excitement of fans, maybe the frustration of fans, all while trying to get some momentum going back in their way. Nashville is a team that doesn't want to be just another chapter in a feel-good story for the Canucks. They are looking to do something they haven't done in a minute, which is win a series for the first time since 2018. The Predators are not a bad team. Again, I'm not going to say that they're going to go out there and be something like Dallas, but I think a lot of times people tend to look at wildcard teams and say, well, they're really bad because they're a wildcard team. Maybe they weren't perfect all year, but they were able to get nearly 100-point season and have guys that had a really impressive campaign. So with all this being said, who am I picking to win this series? I'm going to be picking the Vancouver Canucks in 6 games. And I gotta be honest here, again, the return of Thatcher Demko in and of itself feels like a huge impact for this series. If he was out, it really becomes one of those situations where you could probably flip a coin and say if things go well for Nashville, especially at the start, it very well could be them winning maybe in 5 or 6 games. Instead, I would imagine things go back again to the Canucks side. Look at some other lines, things that went well for them. The Joshua, Bluger, and Garland line that worked out really well. They outscored teams 21-10 in that time. Garland and Joshua play together really well multiple times on different lines. So you have that. Niels Höglander as well, somebody that has 24 even strength goals. Not a lot of people probably know that aren't either really big into the game or aren't focused on the Canucks. It's not just, Miller, it's not just Hughes, it's not just Pettersson, it is plenty of other guys. And I didn't even mention the fact that Brock Besser had a 40-goal season. The Canucks are obviously going to be able to say this was a good year, but they are looking to be a part of some other good Canucks teams over the years and prove themselves as this era and this group of Canucks hasn't really done a whole lot in their time together. They've been able to sign some extensions. Some of these guys are here for the long term. Now is hopefully the beginning of something rather than this just being a flash in the pan. But of course, Nashville will not make this easy. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this series? Let me know down below. Who do you think will win, the Nashville Predators or the Vancouver Canucks, and in how many games? I want to know that. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Also, please make sure to check out this playlist for the previews at the end, talking about other playoff previews in the first round, especially right now. I am going to take a quick power nap before we figure out the final two matchups, do notes, record those, and then edit them all in the morning. Anyway, everybody, please make sure to stay safe. Have a great night, and Eagle of Hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.